Welcome to the 4Heroes podcast. Today's episode is a powerful message from Chaplain Frank Mercer, shared at the 4Heroes Huddle, a weekly gathering of local first responders who meet to find hope and help in God's Word. In this message, Frank walks us through Joshua chapter 3 and reminds us that God specializes in the impossible. Just like the Israelites facing a flooded Jordan River, we may find ourselves staring at circumstances that seem uncrossable. But when we remember who goes before us, the impossible starts to look a lot more like dry ground. This episode is for anyone who's felt stuck, discouraged, or overwhelmed by what's in front of them. You're not alone.
Hey, I'm going to give you some of my favorite Muhammad Ali quotes. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The hands can't hit while the eyes can't see. Love that one. It's just a job. Grass grows, birds fly, waves pound the sand. I beat people up. Just last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick. I love it. I love it. Have you ever seen the motivational poster of Muhammad Ali in his prime standing over Sonny Liston, who's been laid flat? And it says, it's a quote from Muhammad Ali, "Impossible is nothing." I love that, and we're going to come back to it. But first of all, let me read to you from Joshua 3. Joshua told the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." There's about to be a miracle. It is, in my opinion, one of the more overlooked miracles in the Old Testament, but it's hugely significant. And God's saying through Joshua, I'm going to do something for you, but before I do something for you, I need to do something in you. What's God up to? He is forming character. He is trying to produce righteousness and holiness in your life. You're praying for a miracle. There is something that you need, sanctifying you, redeeming you. He's doing something in you before he does something for you. And the Lord said to Joshua in verse 7, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." So the Ark of the Covenant is going to be mentioned 10 times in Joshua chapter 3. God doesn't stutter. There's a reason why it gets mentioned over and over again. The Ark is the most important detail in this story. More important than anything or anyone else in the narrative. It represents the very presence of God. We're going to jump to verse 15. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Okay, so I didn't mention it in the beginning, but there's a problem in Joshua chapter 3, and the problem is named Jordan. It's a river. And man, after all of this time, leaving Egypt, getting to Kadesh Barnea, deciding not to go into the land, and 40 years of wandering, that entire generation of adults who left Egypt is gone. Now their children are about to enter the land, or so it would seem. But there is a problem, and that problem is named Jordan. It's the Jordan River. It would still be a problem, less of a problem, if it were during a normal time of the year. This is springtime, and the river is at flood stage. What's so important about the Jordan? Well, it's a natural boundary. And if you want to go to the promised land, you got to cross it. And like I said, it's the worst time of the year to cross, because the river's at flood stage from all of the spring rain, and now the temperature's warming up. And so in places like Mount Hermon to the north, the snow on Mount Hermon is melting. All that snow melt's coming down, getting into the headwaters, into the Sea of Galilee, coming out the Jordan River. You've got all of this water coming from the rain and from the snow melt, and it's all channeling into the Jordan. And now you have this raging current in the middle of the river where the water is sometimes going to be moving at about 40 miles an hour. And in some places, it's spread out. It's just taking over the land. In some places, it would spread out for nearly a mile, anywhere from 3 to 12 feet deep. And you've got a bunch of men, women, children, about 2 million of them, who've got to cross. I don't think there were very many good swimmers in this tribe. I mean, they've been walking around in the desert for 40 years. There was no opportunity to learn. So here you stand. It looks impossible because it looks impassable. I'm sure it occurred to someone in the group that their parents had once stood in a similar situation where they'd stood on a distant shore caught between the Pharaoh's army to the rear and the Red Sea to the front. And we need a miracle. God parted the Red Sea, and they walked across the Red Sea on dry land. But that was a long time ago. 40 years ago, most of them had only heard the story. They didn't even remember seeing the story. Many of them weren't even alive when it happened. And God probably doesn't do that kind of thing anymore anyway. Here we are, stuck on the wrong side of the Jordan, stuck on the wrong side of God's promise. Feels like there's no way out, there's no way over, there's no way through. We're just stalled out on the far side of the Jordan. This is not what we expected to happen. Have you ever been in a situation like that in your life? Where you felt so close to what you thought God was going to put in your hand, and you're stalled out. You don't know how to get from here to there. You don't know how to get across this barrier that prevents you from receiving what God's promised. Faith means trusting God even when it makes no sense. Trust God even when it makes no sense. When all of your friends are telling you there's no way. But God has clearly told you, I'm going to make a way. You wrestle with what you know. You add it all up and it just doesn't add up. You wrestle with all of these other voices that are compelling you to just turn around and go back to Egypt already. What are we doing here? We had leeks and onions in Egypt. We've buried so many people in the desert, and now we're at the Jordan, and there's no way we're crossing this. Faith means trusting God when it makes no sense. Faith does not ignore the problem, but it's the tangible knowing that God is bigger than the problem is, and that He's willing to help. So verse 15 continues and says, "Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan, and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a place a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the sea of the Arabah, which is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off, so the people crossed over opposite Jordan." So check this out. The priests are carrying this ark, which represents the presence of God. So the presence of God always goes before us. Always goes before us. He is making a way where there is no way. The presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant, is carried right down to the Jordan, and the priests, they're going to stand there, not on dry ground, but in the water. When they stepped into the water, the river stops flowing from the north. The Jordan flows from north to south into the Dead Sea. The water stopped flowing because it was, quoting here, piled up in a heap at a place called Adam. If you measured the distance between Jericho, where they cross the Jordan, to Adam, it's about 19 miles. It's a long way away. Think about the timing of this miracle. That at the precise moment the priests step into the water just starts to go down. There have been efforts to explain this. In 1927, for example, there was an earthquake outside of a dam, and it created a dam that kept water from flowing in the Jordan, and the Jordan actually dried up. And so there have been people who said, well, maybe this was a natural occurrence. Well, even if it was, it's the timing of it. I mean, God can certainly use natural means to accomplish his supernatural agenda. And not only that, but it's dry ground. For the second time, when they cross the Red Sea, they cross on dry ground. When they cross the Jordan River, they cross on dry ground. That's absolutely miraculous. So the water is all piled up at a dam. The river goes dry for 19 miles. And then the water that's still rolling is just rolling to the south to the Dead Sea, and it's emptying out too. That had to be something to see. I'd love to see a drone shot of that. You know? That would have been amazing. Verse 17, the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Dry ground. Dry ground. That means nobody's left behind. Nobody drowned. Nobody even got wet. When their parents, 40 years before, stood and watched the Red Sea part and crossed over on dry ground, they were making their exit out of Egypt. When those people's children stand and witness their own miracle of the Jordan parting, they're making their entrance into the promised land. It's all come around kind of full circle that way. What does this tell you about faith? What does this tell you about God? What does this tell you about your own journey? I'd ask you to think about that. When you think about this miracle at the Jordan, what does it tell you about faith? What does it tell you about God? And what does it tell you about your own journey?
We'll always make a way.
Yeah. Always make a way. You've seen God work like this. Perfect timing. It's like Gandalf says to Frodo in Fellowship of the Rings, a wizard is never late and rarely early. He always arrives exactly when he intended to. I see God show up at 11:59 all the time. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come, right? We may be facing impossible circumstances. I don't know what your impossible circumstance is. You know, whether it's a broken relationship or a failing marriage or a medical report that came back with the word malignant attached to it. If there's a financial crisis that won't go away, if you're struggling with an addiction that you cannot shake, a sea of decisions too wide to cross, a wall of disappointments too high to climb, and God is not fazed by any of it. He's not fazed by the impossible. He's not fazed by the intolerable or the impassable or the improbable or the uncrossable. Jeremiah 32:17. Almighty Lord, you have made heaven and earth by your great strength and powerful arm. Nothing is too hard for you. Job 42:2. I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Luke 18:27. This is Jesus himself. What is impossible with man is possible with God. Ephesians 3:20. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to him be the glory in the church and Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. It all says to me, don't lose hope. Impossible situations are often just the backdrop to God's miraculous solution. To him, impossible is nothing. So there's this great quote from Mark Batterson. The greatest moments in life are the miraculous moments when human impotence and divine omnipotence intersect. And they intersect when we draw a circle around the impossible situations in our lives and invite God to intervene. I want to invite you to do just that. To draw a circle like a fence or a wagon train around the impossible situations in your life and invite God, the God of the impossible, to intervene. Here's all I'm saying. The God of the Bible is a God who makes a way when there is no way. He makes the impossible possible, and he makes the impassable passable. Brings us from one side of that river all the way to the other. And that's all I got to say about that. Let me pray for you, okay?
Thanks for listening to the 4Heroes podcast. We hope this message reminded you that God is not intimidated by your situation, whatever you're facing. He is able. If you're a first responder or know someone in public safety who could use encouragement, we'd love to connect. 4Heroes exists to offer spiritual and emotional support to first responders and their families. If you'd like to support the work we're doing or get involved through prayer, giving, or serving, please visit 4ourheroes.org. That's the number 4, 4ourheroes.org.